Hey everybody, happy Sunday. Hope you all had a great weekend. Here, going to be joined by author Nora Spinnor momentarily to discuss her new book, The Young Man and the Sage. This is part of what will be a trilogy. So The Young Man and the Sage comes out the fall equinox, so next month. Had the pleasure of reading it. So looking forward to chatting with Nora about it, sending over the invite for her to join the video. So Nora is a philosopher, an author, a lifelong alchemist, drawing from a number of ancient mystery traditions. Hi.
Hey,
How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. Looking forward to talking about the book, which when I initially got it, I was like, this is a really, this is a thick book. But, reading through it, it was a super enjoyable and easy read. I got through it pretty quickly, honestly. I think that, it's just really well written, and I like how it's structured. The Young Man and the Sage, it basically communicates a lot of these sort of global philosophical concepts through being structured as a conversation or what you call a platonic dialogue. So just to give everybody like a brief synopsis of what the book is about, essentially a young man goes on a journey and climbs a mountain to meet with a wise sage. And he spends time up there, and they essentially discuss like all of the mysteries of the universe and the journey of the soul. And he goes through this really kind of like shamanic death scenario where he comes to terms with like letting go of different aspects of his old life as he begins to sort of unravel this understanding of like what is really happening out there, spiritually, metaphysically, energetically. So what I thought was really cool about it is that you really kind of combine all of these different things from, alchemy. So we've got sort of like almost a hero's journey in a sense. So elements from that, and then also a lot of alchemical symbolism and the different stages of sort of transmutation expressed through each of the chapters, drawing from like a lot of ancient ancient wisdom, Kabbalah, occultism, but then also kind of combining it with scientific thought and things that we have only really recently begun to understand. So it's a really cool kind of like juxtaposition of these two like very different but complementary ideas or themes. So can you talk like a little bit about your creative process, kind of how it all came together, and how that translated into writing the physical book? I know a lot of
Yeah.
the stuff has to do with your philosophy called Netism, so we can definitely talk about that too.
Yeah, well, I had a lot of philosophical concepts and I was writing short essays and I had this flash of inspiration of, it's kind of a timeless classic of a man climbing a mountain to see a sage for, the secrets to enlightenment, except that this man was a politician and the sage was, he's been living as a hermit for 20 years, so he's going to be a little bit erratic. And it was going to start as a short story, but it just started growing and growing. And I could see that the platform of doing it all through dialogue made it real easy to understand, fun to read, accessible, and I could do an incredible amount of material through the dialogue.
Yeah, I think that it really kind of translates a lot smoother when it's in the form of this dialogue, this conversation. So like when you're writing it, are you kind of like having the conversation with yourself, or are you communicating with like different spiritual guides or energies, or like how does that all look? What's happening in here?
Well, it's hard to pin down a source. I'm getting sparks of inspiration through what I call the net, which in Netism is basically the unified field of consciousness. The strings, the threads of connection are conscious and subconscious impulses. So my inspiration is really pulling from this source. I get archetypes come through in my mind. I also do a lot of research. I've been researching philosophy for a long time. People like Plato, all of the Stoic philosophy. Marcus Aurelius was a really big inspiration for this book. Thoreau actually wrote the last chapter before I began the story. The story began based off of the philosophical essay at the end of the book.
Okay, nice. So Netism essentially is a spiritual philosophy, but it's one that is kind of very universal and not necessarily tied to any one single tradition, but kind of drawing on all of these various different sources of spiritual wisdom and weaving them together.
Correct. My biggest inspiration is actually ancient Egypt. In researching ancient Egypt and the other philosophies that grew around the time, I really started seeing how everything connected. There's so many similar themes. Hinduism, most ancient texts are very similar to ancient Egypt. And the same philosophies in Hinduism and ancient Egyptian thought are present in current quantum physics. Going through all these different sources, that's really what culminated a lot of the works within Netism, the young man and the sage being one of them.
Nice. So if somebody wanted to kind of learn more about Netism and what all that entails, there's a couple different websites that they can visit if you want to share those.
Yes, netism.org is the main Netism website. That covers an outline of our philosophy. It's got a lot of different stuff on there. There's the 9 points of Netism is probably the most important outline of what we're about. And then if you want to get into the deeper metaphysics, livingnetism.com is the place to go. It's a community page, social media that's been about 2 months in the making, so we're beginning. But there is a lot of material already on there that I post. Numerology, ether physics, astrology. There's philosophy, of course. There's a lot of subjects on there. Energy centers.
Yeah, a lot of really fascinating stuff on the websites that you can really just kind of get lost in this rabbit hole and just kind of like my brain kind of goes crazy when you start thinking about all of these different things. Life after death, the unified consciousness, field of consciousness. Yeah, I just kind of get like very, very science fiction-y, with my thought process behind all of that. So it's super, super satisfying.
Yeah, well, it shouldn't be too much fiction because we do pull from a lot of real physicists in the field, Roger Penrose. To go into the second book, I researched a ton of inventors from Henry Moray, Nikola Tesla. There's a lot more. I can't think of them right this second, but we pull from a lot of physics.
So one thing that I thought was cool about the book is that each chapter it starts with its own illustration. And then when you go to the back of the book, there's actually an analysis of those images, and it kind of breaks it down into the alchemical symbolism and interpretation that also kind of goes along with the theme of that chapter. Can you talk a little bit about like some of the symbolism that went into those images?
Yeah, so everything in the book, you can both take it literally and symbolically. And each chapter, there's 15 chapters for a reason. They each define a different stage on the path to enlightenment. So one is beginning, two is death. So we're going to, when you look in the alchemical symbolism in the back, you will see themes within the chapter that aren't necessarily obvious within the book, but you'll get a deeper understanding of what it represents. But I should add that, you know, each person who reads this book will probably have slightly different takeaways, and that's okay. It's supposed to be out in the world, and it's not necessarily one interpretation goes for all. There's different ways of reading into it and rereading it too. Over, say, you know, a period of a year, you might have a completely different takeaway from the book, given where you have gone within your spiritual journey.
For sure, yeah, that's definitely something that I noticed when I was reading it, and it was just kind of like, okay, this book kind of found me, and I'm gonna read it and do a little review and do a little interview, and that'll be cute and great and all of that. And then as I'm reading it, I'm like, oh gosh, like I'm actually doing like a spiritual inventory and having to like reflect on all of these deep things, and it really kind of brought up some different areas like where there is resistance or maybe fear when we start to think about like the afterlife and what happens to the soul or the spirit when we die and all that that kind of implies. And for me it was like this fear of like losing everything that I have kind of gathered together during this lifetime, and becoming sort of like this blank slate that goes off into the universe, essentially just like a blank energy that then cycles back and becomes somebody totally different. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I want to keep all the stuff that I bring with me.
Yeah, but I think I tried to make it clear in the book that, you know, the physical things in your life will change. You could wake up in a completely different new world, but your spiritual resonance continues. You know, the struggles that you face and you overcome, that those lessons are carried. The lessons that you take remain within your spirit. Your spiritual resonance continues. So you're not going to wake up, you may not know anything, but the spirit remembers. The way you're going to apply it in life is learned, but the spirit has its natural tendencies. So
Yeah, I love that.
yeah, you may not ascend this life. That's okay. We have many tries, but every challenge we overcome is worth it. Every mistake we learn from contributes to our growth in the long run.
For sure. Yeah, I love that quote, the spirit remembers. And just kind of as we were chatting about all of this too, kind of pointing out that it's when we come down here in our physical incarnation, that's actually when we forget and when we kind of like lose the
So
connection to all of these greater things.
in between lives, you're kind of given all the answers. You're shown all the timelines. You see, there's no denying of the things that you went wrong. But when you go into the next life, those memories start to fade. And the more you integrate, the more they fade. Where by the time you're a child of about 5, you have, you know, almost all your past life memories, although it varies from person to person, those memories are almost gone. And there's a point behind that. You know, you have to go through the same lessons and go through the tests and prove that you're actually learning it. When you experience it and you apply it, that's what makes the transformation. You can gain all the knowledge in the world, but until you actually use it and gain the wisdom, it's meaningless.
Yeah, it's kind of mind-boggling when you start thinking about, alternate timelines and multiple dimensions and sort of this multiverse approach to existence, and that we're, living in all of these different parts of the universe.
I'd say the key takeaway from that is not to get overwhelmed and obsessed with what your other soul shards are doing, but remember that even the mistakes that you make are helping your other soul shards. So it's kind of like this database. You're not evolving alone. You've got these other subtle threads sending you impulses. And if you listen to your intuition, that may be your spirit and maybe another soul shard saying, hey, don't do that. This has been tried already. Um, so it's really, you've got a whole team of you trying to evolve together.
I feel that, and I definitely shout out to the other soul shards, because I do feel like there have been many instances where there's been somebody out there looking out, having my back, keeping me out of getting into more trouble than what I already did. So
Yeah, I've had times where I didn't listen to my intuition and I had to pay for that. So I learned, pretty young, late teenagers to listen to my gut because it's generally right.
yeah, for sure, I can definitely relate to that. Um, so what can people kind of expect from the next two books?
Okay, so the young man and this, are you talking about after the young man in the
Yeah,
sage?
after this one.
Yeah.
So The Young Man in the Sage is the first one, and then there's two more coming in the trilogy.
Okay, yes. So the second book is set 50 years in the future. We meet Leolus on the mountain again, only this time he is the one living there and teaching. And a new student arrives. He is an African immigrant and physicist who is desperate to save a dying world. So he goes through a lot of lessons in metaphysics through ether, lessons in water, geometry, consciousness, and it's Hugo's device that he's building is based off of Malcolm Bendel's thunderstorm generator. So there is real physics going into the book. And Hugo relates this through concepts of ancient Egypt, through shamanistic indigenous practices. So it's not just metaphysics. We're watching Leolis's continued journey. We're seeing how ancient religions, ancient spiritual systems relate, and getting a lot of different metaphysical concepts that are easy to digest through the dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely. Super excited to check those out. It is really interesting when you think about like, ancient wisdom and metaphysics, and it sort of expresses a lot of the things that I think through modern science and quantum physics and things like that we've come to have like a deeper understanding of now. So it expresses those things in like a much more, poetic and abstract way. But now with kind of what we've learned about the universe through space exploration and theoretical mathematics and things that we've actually been able to prove, it's really kind of expanded our awareness of not only the world around us but the wider universe. And I think that definitely has like a spiritual connotation, or kind of like spiritual evolution too. Originally we were only really aware of like what was happening on the earth, and then like observing celestial movements and things like that, but the universe has just become so much bigger for us as humans.
Yeah, well, within the West, I would say that's how it is. If you look at the physics coming out of India, they've kind of always had this understanding. Morphic resonance here, it blows the mind of Western scientists. And that's basically this biofield that every species have of like shared traits, shared instinctive traits. Um, but he showed it to the Hindu scientists. They were like, "Oh yeah, we've known this. This is no surprise. This is just more proof to what we already know." But it's really good that the West, like the Gaia channel, for example, is finally getting people tuned into these concepts.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, so like if you guys want to take a deep dive into all of this, definitely visit the netism.org website. Also check out livingnetism.com, which you mentioned is the community page, structured like a social media interaction. Where can people pre-order the book?
We are available on Amazon, and there is also a direct link under the publications section of the netism.org website.
Nice. So the book talks a lot about soul shards, and we, I guess, touched on it a little bit. Can you kind of explain that sort of in a nutshell? Because I feel like that's kind of like one of the more important takeaways.
Yes. So if you're familiar with parallel worlds theory, in cosmology or quantum physics, it says that there's not just this universe, there's many universes stacked together, nested within one another, or parallel. We just can't perceive them. So your soul shards, one soul is so massive that when a spirit has to incarnate in a physical body, only a portion of that vibration can descend into the body. So you're actually split across parallel worlds, dimensions, different worlds in the universe, multiverse, and you are all incarnating together. It splits the experience across a whole bunch of different people. So instead of just one soul trying to gain all of the experience needed, it's all of them acting at the same time. And by nature, you tend to have different preferences, tend to make different decisions. So that's how evolution, it helps on an evolutionary level.
Nice. And then we have a question here. I'm so sorry to hear about the loss of your dog. Does the book cover anything about grief, or is that something that you'll be touching on, in future books, or maybe like any of the articles on the website?
I think we need to devote a specific, I need to make a group for grief on livingnetism.com. I think the book doesn't get into it very heavily. It discusses how life goes on and how consciousness continues after death, how the spirit world is very real, and sometimes we can contact that. So I hope it gives hope to people who are going through struggles, but I think that's something that we need to address more specifically. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree. I think that the message in the book is something that would um, definitely kind of like offer support and allay, fears surrounding death and loss and the anxiety that kind of comes with that. I like personally, ever since I was a little kid, I've had like this death anxiety, not so much about my own, but about my loved ones and like what's going to happen to them and all of that. And it's something that's been like pretty much on repeat in my mind throughout my life. Probably why I am so drawn to necromantic practices, working with the spirit world, poisonous plants is kind of stems from that death phobia. But I think when you really start to kind of internalize and digest a lot of these concepts and sort of realize the vastness of the universe and what's actually happening, that it makes it a lot less scary and reduces a lot of that anxiety. So definitely, thank you for that.
Yeah, we never know how much time we're going to get with people. However, we're always somewhat connected to our past. The memories are always accessible. Our past life memories are accessible. That's always there. The connections, the threads are there. When you're thinking about someone, whether they're alive or have passed, you're forming threads of connection. So, there is hope in that there's more than just you, your physicality, and that's it. I think that that's what scares people a lot about death because they think, this is my only life and I'm physical and this is consciousness and it's human and that's it. Whereas Netism really expands consciousness to so much more than this. This is a part of our life that we should cherish, but this is not everything.
Nice. So I really like the analogy of the net because it connects to the practice of weaving, and you mentioned a lot about different threads. And can you kind of explain a little bit about what the net is and what that implies? And that's kind of where Netism gets its name, right?
Yeah, so this is actually a very ancient concept. It was known to the ancient Egyptians. The Neter, their gods and goddesses, were beings who could pull from the net. The net of Nun, which was basically zero, undifferentiated chaos. The Hindus have the net of Indra, which is almost identical to Netism's description, which is a universal web of conscious fibers where each jewel within it reflects the whole. And this is reflective of the holographic principle of mind, in that each of us may be one expression, but in reality, we are each a reflection of the whole. Our spiritual nature is fluid, and we are connected to everything else. Netism, it's threads of consciousness, and it's threads that we may not always recognize, but I know if you've ever got a phone call, but you've thought of that person moments before that phone call, Netism sets the framework for understanding that, because these are the threads of connection of spirit, of consciousness, of thought. Thought has a very powerful influence on the net, as does intent.
Nice. And that kind of plays into sort of my next thought. How does this all fit into one's magical practice?
So magical practice, it's Netism will give you a huge advantage of that. We talk a lot about Heka, which is the magic of ancient Egypt, and it is the magic of thought, intent, and vibration. I practice myself, and I definitely do, some work with herbs. We have mantra work, which is our system is called Esoteric. So we're developing vibrational keys that, when spoken, have a powerful effect on your consciousness as well as the net. It really sets the framework to do magic effectively. And I'm going to be writing a lot more about that in my Cosmic Alchemy book.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm just looking through the netism.org website, and there is, a section specifically on Heka. What is Heka? Heka and religions, Heka and magic. So definitely check that out at netism.org. Very cool. If anybody watching live has any questions for Nora and you want to pop those in before we wrap it up, and if there's anything else that you want to touch on, Nora, before we go.
I see someone mention something about chakras. So I want to add that we have a system of 12 energy centers, which is the 7 chakras translates to it. We have 9 bodily centers. So beyond the 7 chakras, that adds the fluid center and the breath center. So if you are into the chakras and elemental associations, Netism's framework is definitely something to check out.
Nice. And I know we just did a chat about that the other day. You've got some clips from that on the Netism official Instagram, and then it's also on the YouTube channel, correct?
Yes, the full video is on the YouTube channel.
Sweet.
And I'll be doing some more lessons. I'm really just getting started with that. So definitely stay tuned for more metaphysical information.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Nora. I'm really looking forward to the next couple of books and to, just get to see how all of this grows because I think that it's really important work. Definitely recommend that you guys check out The Young Man and the Sage, which comes out this September, the fall equinox. So
Correct.
you can pre-order that. It's available on Amazon. Also, check out the netism.org website. There's a lot of really interesting material on there that you can read through to kind of get your gears turning before the book comes out.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nora. Thank you, everybody watching live and in the future. And we will see you next time.